Welcome back. So now that the nav bar is mostly done, let's tackle the next bit of content, which is this top section here, where we have this image on the right with the gloved hand holding a donut for whatever reason, and then this series of headings over here, and they scale, so that's going to be some work. You'll notice the font size actually changes right there. So that involves some non-Bootstrap CSS media queries to do that. Then also, the text just disappears entirely, and this image takes up the entire space at one point. And other than that, I guess the fact that it's centered vertically, we have to pay attention to, but it's not too bad. So that's what we're going to get to work on. And we'll start by adding in our index.html underneath the nav, we'll add in a new section. And we need to use a container because we're going to be using the grid system here. But remember that a regular container goes only part of the way across the screen, and this content goes all the way across. You can tell over here. I'm using a fluid container. So a fluid container works the same way. You can use a grid system inside of it with a row and columns, but it goes all the way across. So that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to do a section, the class of fluid-container, or is it container fluid? It's container fluid. I always mess that up. And then in addition, inside of that, we have one row, and they're splitting it 50-50. So this is 6 out of 12, and this is 6 out of 12. So let's begin with let's just make those two. So let's make the row. It's a row, which is a div with the class of row. And then inside of that, we have two columns. So div with the class of column 6, and then another column 6 below. And in the first one, let's just put some placeholder text. Let's just do like an H2 that says Museum of Candy to start. That's not going to be our end-all, be-all. So you can see right off the bat, we have a small issue. Let's get the image in first before we worry about anything else. So this column 6 on this side, we have the space designated, but there's nothing in it. We're going to put an image, and the image we want is included in the images folder. It's called hand2.png. I know it's not a great image. I had a hand1 and I deleted it, so it's hand2. Hand2.png. And if we just leave it like that, it's inside of the images folder, imgs, you'll see we have a small problem. First of all, this is huge, but it is going 50% across the screen. What we can do is give it the class of image fluid. This is a Bootstrap class to make images responsive. If you look here on the docs, it mentions to make an image responsive, you can give it the class of image fluid, and it just changes the height property to be auto and max width to be 100%. It just makes it easier to work with images in the grid system and make them scale so that it shrinks down at different sizes. All right, so we're gonna have to fix the fact that there's still 50-50 here. We'll get them to stack. But we also have this issue on the side. If you inspect what's going on, it's kind of hard to see here, but the container, where are you? Container fluid has padding on the left and right, just a little bit of padding. So we're going to get rid of that. On the left and right, the way that we do it is by going to the container and saying px0, padding x, which is the same as padding left and padding right, 0. Refresh the page, that padding is gone. Now our content goes all the way over, including this. Next, let's talk about how we align this content vertically. So if we look at what's going on, we have this image going all the way across the row vertically. It's taking up all the space. Over here, we have all of this empty space, and Museum of Candy is just at the top. So the property we want to use to align it vertically, if you watched a couple videos ago when I talked about Flexbox and the grid, the property we want is align items. So align items is going to, depending on what we tell it, like if we did align items on the row, end and refresh, our content now is aligned at the bottom here. But I want center. And you'll see that our content is now centered. Next, we want to make sure that our text is centered, and that's easier. We can just give it on the actual H2, the class of text center. We're going to have to rebuild this content anyway, but we're sort of approximating the content. So this will fill in with this in a little bit, but we have some content on the left and our image on the right. Now we need to tackle this problem of getting it to collapse. I want this entire thing to go away and have this image take up all the space once we get to, let's see, which breakpoint was it? Right here. So I believe this is large. So extra small, medium, or extra small, small, and medium, there is no heading over here. This is gone. So to get that to work, we need to go and change our classes. We only want this to be column 6 at size large, and this to be column 6 at size large. Now if we refresh, okay, it's sort of working where they are side by side, 50-50, and then once we get to medium and small, they stack. But we don't want to see this period. It's not that we want it to stack, we want it to go away. So to get rid of it, we can set the display to be none using those display utilities. So I'm going to start, make this a little easier. I'm going to make 3 of these, and then I'm going to wrap them in another div so that I can hide them all together like this and indent them properly. There we go. So now I can say something like, first I can do text white, for example, and they're all going to be white. Second of all, I can get rid of this text center on all of them, delete that, and center them all because of this div. So I'm just reducing duplication to start, and they're centered, which doesn't look any different from before, but now we only write text center once. But the most important part, I can say, hide yourself, don't show up, but then I'm going to say, all right, you can show up once we get to large. So we say D large block. So hopefully that's a review from earlier when we talked about the responsive display utility. There's no extra small size, so we say display none from all sizes except large and up should be block. So now we have most of this working. Our content, I actually kind of like how this looks too with these smaller text. You could leave it at this, change the color. You don't have to make it large like this, but we're going to because I promised we would. And if we shrink it down, everything's still centered vertically. And then down here, our image is now underneath our navbar, and it looks really nice in my opinion. Keep going, get it to collapse. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Okay, so next, let's focus on the text. First of all, if we count how many of these we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Museum of Candies. So let's go ahead and duplicate. Well, actually, let's make one of them correct first, instead of doing all of them and then changing them all. So we have a couple things to tackle. One is the font size and the font weight. This is thicker text. This is light text. Also the slashes. So we could start, we need to single out those slashes and make them red. And this part's a little annoying, but I'm going to make a span for each one and put a slash in the middle of it. So we have that span, and then we're going to do another span. So museum / candy. And then we can go into our CSS and style those spans. And you could give them a class, honestly. It's going to clutter your markup a bit. Or we can just selectively, we could say, give this an ID. Let's call this heading. And then, or let's actually go with heading group. That's more specific. And then I can say in my app.css, inside of heading group, all spans, we're going to make them red. So rather than just making every span red on the entire page, because we might have more spans later on, this is more specific, only inside of that heading group. And if we refresh, cool, we're getting that Museum of Candy with the red slashes. Next, let's work on the font weight. So what I did, we don't have to do this, but I used the display 2 class on the H2. So we've seen that display 1 through 4. It just makes it larger. And am I zoomed in? Okay, so this is a little bit too large, as you can see, and I scaled it down, which we will tackle in a bit. The next thing we'll do is change the font weight. So we'll come back into our CSS and select, it's up to us how we want to do this. We can select all the H2s, which now that I'm thinking about this, it might make more sense to make these H1s because they are the largest piece of text on our page. And then I'm going to go in and select the H1s in the heading group once again. And so I'll just duplicate that. Heading group H1, instead of changing the color, we're going to change font weight to be 100. So it's thinner. So that's the first step. Next, I'm going to give them a size, a font size, which is 4 rems. And I just did some trial and error to arrive at that size. Now let's make 7 of them. So I'm just going to duplicate 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Save. there's our content. And you'll see that it's a little cramped up here. So I went and added in some margin top to the heading group. So just here, margin top -5, refresh. We have a bit more breathing room up there. And you could tweak that number and play around with it. So this looks good, except we run into a big problem right here. Our text is not scaling. We need it to shrink down. So if you look at my version here, I have it shrink right there to a different size, scale it down, and then it disappears. So we can do that pretty easily, but we have to take advantage of a media query, which we haven't really chatted about very much. So media queries allow us to selectively apply styles based off of different screen sizes. And the screen size that we're going to use is right about here where it starts to get ugly, about 1200 or so pixels. So the way we write it is at media, and then we're going to say max width, and then a screen size, like 1200 pixels. And then inside of here, whatever we change, let's say we make the body a different color. Let's say color, I don't know, orange. And this should be background color. All right, so let's take a look. Once we hit less than 1200, it's right there. So we can play around with this number. So imagine this is our size of our content. At what point do we think it's too crowded? I think it looks okay still. Still looks okay, but then maybe, yeah, right? Honestly, that's about the point where I would change it. So change it to be smaller font size from then on out. And the way we can do that is in here, instead of changing the color of the body, we're going to select those H1s inside of the heading group and change their font size to be maybe 3 rems. Let's see. Is that going to work for us? Right here. There we go. It shrinks down. And it looks good. Yeah, that looks great on all sizes. Now we could add another one in if you think that it's a little too cramped right here. We could change it to be like 3.5 rems, because right now it's 4. But it's just one little breakpoint that's problematic. So I think it's okay, honestly. So here looks pretty good. Looks good in all sizes. That's our first introduction to using a media query. And I'll leave it at that for now. Our heading section is complete. We have the image. It's responsive. It looks good. Next, we're going to tackle these 3 sections down below, which are all pretty similar. They're just in reverse order. And then we're almost done.